Thank you very much for joining us today for our live stream, Better Buildings, Conversations That Matter. My name is Mike Boyle, and I am very blessed today to have a stellar crew of panelists. But before I go ahead and give the panelists an opportunity to go ahead and tell us all a little bit about themselves and get the conversation going, I have a question for you to get our activities together with you, getting them to move. And so if we look at the entire carbon footprint and the problems that we're trying to solve, how much of this problem, the percentage of the carbon footprint that we need to go ahead and take into consideration, how much is actually coming from the building sector? So what I'd like you to do is go ahead and take a look and find the chat box and put in the chat box what you think the answer is, and feel free to put in multiples, that's fine, and we will go ahead and quickly, after our introductions, look and see what the actual answer is. But before I go ahead and do that, I'd like to bring on board, and I'm going to need my panelists to go ahead and unmute themselves, so I apologize for that. And we'll go ahead and allow for our panelists to introduce themselves, and then we'll get started with the conversation. So perhaps, Alexa, if you'd like to go ahead and get us started.
Thank you so much, Mike. My name is Alexa Lutzenberger. I'm from Hamburg, Germany, and my profession is working in resource efficiency on construction site with my company, and we are focusing on 3 indicators to climate change, energy transition, and resource efficiency. Thank you so much.
Whoa, and I think you had it under 50 words, so congratulations for that, Alexa. So Tatum, the pressure is on you. Give you the stage.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. My name is Tarun Jami. I'm the founder of Green Jams. We're into material innovation. We essentially create carbon negative building materials from agricultural waste and industrial wastes. We're solving for climate change and decarbonizing the built environment while making it energy efficient. Thank you so much.
All right, excellent. Okay, then let's go ahead and move on to Drew. Perhaps if you could tell us a little bit about yourself, Drew.
Hi, my name is Drew Oberholzer, co-founder of Coexist Build. We're a full-service architecture company, manufacturer of the insulating hemp block, and we're focused on bringing healthier materials to market in the U.S.
Okay, very good. And let's go ahead and move on to Catalina. Thank you.
Hi, Mike. Hi, everyone. My name is Catalina Romano from Colombia. I'm here in Bogota. I'm civil engineer, and I work with the Ministry of Environment in Colombia, and making public policy related to construction materials, related to circular economy, and sustainable construction.
All right, very good. Susanna, perhaps if you'd like to go ahead. Unfortunately, I know that you're not able to go ahead and you're traveling right now. Perhaps if you can give us a little bit of indicator of what you're up to.
Can I please do it in 5 minutes?
Yeah, sure, of course, no worries.
Mike, sorry.
Good. Let me go ahead and raise the question to all of you again. How much of our problems tied to the carbon footprint do you think is actually coming from the building sector? And please feel free to go ahead and put your answers directly into the chat box. And we'll go ahead and give it a little bit of time. And I will definitely give you an answer, and we'll come up with a description as such. But while we are waiting for some answers coming from the chat box, I'd like to go ahead and pose a question to all of our panelists. When we talk about better buildings, one of the problems we have is, depending upon where you are, better building is sometimes not building at all. And so I would be curious to get your opinion as to, is that really an issue? I think we might have some discrepancies here on the panel. And if so, then how do we actually go ahead and do that? Any volunteers?
Can I go ahead?
Please feel free.
So I'm actually on the other end of the spectrum where I say that with the right kind of technology, with the right kind of materials, it's actually better to build than to not build at all. And that would happen essentially. So let's look at the entire monumental challenge that we have at this point, right? We're putting approximately 3.1 gigatons of, sorry, is that 31 gigatons? Correct me if I'm wrong, but then, hey, I mean, whatever it is, I mean, so there's a certain amount of carbon dioxide that we're actually putting out in the atmosphere. And for us to be way below the 2 degrees centigrade rise in temperature, we need to cut down our emissions by a minimum of 10%. And some models essentially suggest that even cutting it down by 10% would still overshoot the 2 degree centigrade increase in temperature. And therefore, we're on this this race in trying to understand how we could essentially cut those emissions, and therefore that's basically where we have the entire concept of negative emissions technologies. So with materials like what we create at Green Jams, these are carbon negative. So when you look at it as a whole, it's an embodiment. It's basically the epitome of what negative emissions technologies are. So we anyway have the challenge of housing so many people. There's going to be more people that would need housing, and when you're actually having to build so many buildings, you might as well make them an agent of climate change mitigation. And therefore, if you look at it as if you look at building as a solution to reversing climate change, then I guess we should build more, right?
I'm going to make a general assumption there might be somebody here on the panelists who might have a different opinion. Any thoughts?
Oh, sorry, Catalina, it's yours.
I think it's a matter of efficiency. We need to build. We need somewhere to live. We need somewhere to work. We need hospitals. We need buildings. And it's a fact that we need to be more efficient in what we're doing in terms of materials, in terms of the operation, the use of water, the use of energy. So I think that we have a huge challenge in terms of finding more efficient ways to build, to have housing, to have hospitals, to operate them efficiently through their life cycle. So we need buildings. We don't have a choice to stop building just because it increases emissions. We need to find a way to reduce the emissions, to have better practices to improve the process of the construction, I think.
And I think, looking at the life cycle and building, if you're building new, these buildings should really last quite some time. Unfortunately, in the U.S., many homes that are built, their life cycle is 30 years, and the construction materials sent to a landfill. So if you're building new, building better, and then if there's an opportunity to reuse and renovate existing buildings with better materials that embody carbon and help climate change, I think that's an approach that should be really done.
So I think in the global thing, it's not the question. It's not the question if we want to build anything. We have to build because just for homes, we need up to 2050 more than 3 billion homes worldwide. So And the question is, the people want to have an apartment. The people want to work, how Catalina said before. And I think we have to really think about which materials we use. How can we strengthen up the resource efficiency? How can we use second raw materials, so recycled materials, and how we can also use, for example, building parts of buildings that are in a deconstruction. So we have a lot of material that we can use again on one side, and on the other side we have this fantastic renewable materials that are CO2 neutral, like Drew and Tanya pointed out before. But we have to build, and this is the biggest point. And I do not play with you. So 40% of all global emissions came from construction site, and that's a huge amount. And this is the biggest problem we have in the whole climate change discussion.
Yes, you're really surprising me because you are actually in much more of an agreement than I expected. Perhaps Susanna, would you have anything you'd like to go ahead and add to the conversation? Give you an opportunity to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yes,
as well.
Thank you very much. And I'm very sorry. Somebody walked on the railway, so the train was really late at the moment. To add something. If you see at the apartments, they grew in the last years, and 20 years ago we spent about 30 square meters per person, and now in Austria we have already 43 square meter per person. That's very much, and we could solve it also by using the apartments and the buildings effective, and we use the word sufficiency. I don't know what is in English. Sufficiency. This
Sufficiency.
Sufficiency. Thank you very much. Sufficiency.
Thanks, Alexa.
That's I think that's the magic word, because we do have already 60% of our houses are already existing, and we have to use it in another way. And somebody talked already about vertical farming. That's right. We can also use it to produce vegetable, for instance, and we're starting right now in Austria. It's a completely new field. This is also one of my background. I co-founded in the year 2016 an innovation lab, which is dealing with greening the houses and greening the roofs and the walls and also the inner side. And on the second part, I'm also president of the Institute of Ecologic Building, Green Buildings, and this is called EBO. And we are doing certification for buildings, for instance, and also dealing with renewable materials. That's for me, for myself.
Yeah, and I think you're going to be proud of me, Susanna, because I came up with a great segue to that of what you're talking about, and certainly the problems that we know here in Austria. If we look at these figures, I understand that maybe the question was a tad too difficult for the audience. I apologize for that, but take a look at what you see on your screen. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that the figures from 2016, probably the percentages are going to be pretty accurate. Now, this is a little bit of a bit of a tricky situation. You'll see on your screen that we have 6% as buildings, but that is a misnomer. Take a look at the diagram in green. 25% electricity and heat, and this is the segue to you, Susanna, because one of the problems that we have with existing buildings is that we're losing so much energy from existing buildings. Yes, we do have an issue where we need to go ahead and build buildings, but part of our problem is that we are building in places where we don't necessarily need the buildings. And I'm going to go ahead and go a little bit more on a limb. Looking at our situation here in Austria after the pandemic, we're just like the old donkey who cannot wait to go back to the stall, and we keep talking about GDP again. And we keep saying, oh, we're building all these new buildings. That means that the economy is moving forward. And so this is, from our perspective, or at least from what I'm looking from my perspective, this is the issue that we need to deal with. So how do we come to a conclusion? On the one side, we do need buildings, and I agree with that wholeheartedly. But secondly, we look at this as being the driver of growth, whereas in essence, if we look at the number of buildings that are unoccupied here in Austria, if we look at the ground that is being hoarded just for speculation purposes, then I really have to question, and especially the figure that I talked about earlier, where we have 3 times as much being built here in Austria than the number of people that are actually coming into the country. So we have a very serious problem of overdevelopment because we consider development to be growth. Anybody care to take that one up?
Sure, I can.
Go for it, Alexa.
Counted GDP, yeah. So it's a material-based system we are living in, but it's our economy system is material-based. And that's why material use is showing in development and economic development. And this is one of the big problems we still have. Counting, calculating, and measuring.
Yep, I agree wholeheartedly. Tarum.
So I'm going to give you an Indian perspective. Construction is the second largest employer in our country. I don't know the exact numbers on how many people it employs, but also contributes to about almost 10% to the country's GDP. Well, leaving politics aside, the failures of the current government, they're actually relying on construction and infrastructure growth as a way to pump up the GDP and provide employment to people. So it was actually also one of the first non-essential sectors which opened up during the coronavirus pandemic. So that actually says a lot about what construction means to India. And it's not just Austria. I'm sure this is a problem all across the world where there is a lot of unused inventory. And the problem with unused inventory is this. Builders and other people essentially build because they want to make it as a vehicle for investment. So construction has always been an amazing asset class to put your money in, because it's always going to grow. Because land is always going to be in demand, housing is always going to be in demand, and therefore, basic simple logic says that your money is going to appreciate when you invest in real estate. But the problem essentially is this. Why do we have so much unused inventory? It's because apartments or homes are not built for the sort of people who essentially would be making the purchases. It begs this simple question, right? I mean, we have so much unused inventory in cities like Delhi and Bombay, and Delhi, Mumbai, Chennai, Bangalore, and so on. And yet, the immigrants, the people who are actually coming from the rural villages to the urban locations, still find it difficult to get a house on rent. So that's actually a question. That's actually something that we need to be thinking about. The unused inventory is because all of the inventory that we have is not for the people who should be occupying it.
Do you all feel that we're still on track with the subject, better building, and better building being the material that we use, and also making sure that the buildings are being used? Your thoughts?
I think that we all know that the markets can regulate themselves. So I think that, for example, in Colombia is not it's not that kind of a scenario, because we have a deficit in housing, for example, but we have a deficit in in good housing too. So we find expensive homes with deficient services and things like that. So I think it's a good time to think the market differently and create new incentives to, for example, for constructors to rent. So you better have your house or your apartment or your building used because you are losing money if you're not, if you don't rent it, for example. So I think it's a good time to start thinking about services instead of products, for example, in housing and in the real estate sector in general. So, and the public policy could go and create incentives to have better housing, better buildings, and occupied buildings to reduce the footprint and all the negative impacts of buildings, I think.
And that's a very interesting thing about this. In India, we have housing deficit. It's not like we don't have housing deficit, but we still have unused, unsold inventory in terms of the number of housing units that we have, and that's I don't know. I mean, I'm actually at loss of words, but yeah, I'll let the other person talk, please.
Yeah, perhaps if we can give Drew and Susanna an opportunity to contribute to the conversation.
Yeah, I just have one quick thing to sort of add. I think, when we look to build better buildings, we can look at efficiency, we can look at the materials, and the building can be better. But, I think it's also important to look at local economies, and I think it's important to build resilient and sustainable local economies that support the entire system. So you're not left with a boom and bust situation where there's inventory that's left unused. So if you have local resilient economies, it helps support the entire system.
Well, especially in the United States, that the housing is one of the biggest drivers of productivity, quote unquote. And I think that cycle that you were referring to, also tied to the interest rates and the like, is a big driver. Susanna, anything you'd like to go ahead and add from your end?
Yes, thank you very much. In
Sure,
Austria, the construction companies, it's not the biggest economy side. It's the second one. We have about more than 300,000 employees, and this is this we can see it in relation if we can create new jobs, for instance, and fabricate the PV, the photovoltaic here in Austria, we could create 200,000 jobs. And if every second new building with a flat roof will be greened, we can establish another 33,000 jobs. This means we have to switch our economic. And on the other hand is what right now happens is the prices for the materials on the construction site, they are increasing. We have about 180% price increase with the timber material at the moment. And what happens right now is that the people are started thinking to reuse the material. And for the first time since the last more than 20 years, we are realizing that the people are thinking about the materials. How can we use it? How do we get the local materials? And I think this is a really good situation right now, what happens. And I hope it will take on like this.
Well, especially if we're talking about the use of virgin materials, because obviously with the question of the price, that means that we need to think of alternates, which obviously goes in the direction of you, Todd, and you, Drew. And secondly, let's go ahead and make sure that we use our resources wisely. We have a comment coming from Ati. that I would like to go ahead and throw into the round and get your opinion. This is her perspective looking at the planning in Nairobi. So now we have an African perspective as well, which is very nice. Means that we have oversupply of offices and undersupply of affordable housing. High interest rates equals few mortgages equals people build over time, which is inefficient. Now, I'd be curious from our esteemed panelists to get your opinion whether you see those tendencies also in your own market.
Absolutely. I mean, this happens a lot in India. The reason that we have so many offices, I guess it's pretty common with every developing country, right? It's basically the commercial properties, as in the office buildings, which fetch the more amount of return on investment. And therefore, everyone wants to build office buildings, and not a lot of people want to build affordable housing because you can't make a lot of money on it. It's just business. And that's precisely why there's an entire debate on how housing must be tackled. I mean, should it be coming from the government, or should it be on the open free market? Thanks, I'm done.
Ooh, that's a question for our panelists. Anybody like to go ahead and contribute?
Yeah, we have to establish incentives for this reason. Yes, sure. I admit.
Catalina, I think you wanted to go ahead and say something.
Yes, it happens the same thing here in Colombia. We have many offices, but there are or there should be incentives to have mixed use, to change the use of office buildings, or to renovate office buildings, old office buildings, to become homes. I think we should think about redistributing the existing buildings and improve and start repurposing the existing areas. I think it should be a good way to use what's already built and decrease the amount of maybe families without their own house, or families without a home at all.
Alexa, you have the advantage of being given the opportunity to work on multiple continents. That was part of your description. I don't know if it was the official part, but at least the unofficial part, I caught on that. I'd be keen on your opinion.
So just one point to the other discussion. So I think it's a question from the policy side, from the social policy approach. And here in Germany, we still have always, if you want to build up an apartment house, for example, you have to, and it's depending from the community or from municipality, you have a percentage of apartments that tend to be for people with less income, for example. So kind of social housing, so that also people without money can get apartments. And actually in Hamburg, we still have from the city. We still build up a lot of apartments, but especially here in Hamburg, it's a situation that we still have less of apartments. But it's getting better here than in many other regions of Germany, for example, Munich or also Frankfurt. They still have a really huge problem with less of apartments for the people who want to go into the city. On the other side, the rural areas still have a lot of houses that nobody want to buy anymore. And we are talking here in Germany about rebuild complete villages, because just for one or two people to hold a complete infrastructure, that's crazy, and that's enormous expensive for the governments of these rural regions. I think this is also a huge part of the discussion. So actually we have, and I think it's the same situation maybe also in Austria. So on the land side, you still have apartments, you still have houses, and then on the city side, you have the problematic with list of apartments and so on. And we have to solve that. And I know that also from Thailand and also from other regions of the world. And this is the problem, yes.
Drew, we want to make sure that you're given an opportunity as well. Anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I mean, affordable housing, is always an issue in the U.S., and the market really drives that. And in New York, for example, in New York City, I mean, a lot of office buildings have been turned into condos. But for example, if you're near Central Park, the first 50 floors are essentially vacant. There's nothing there because you don't have a view of Central Park. So there's a lot of space that's underutilized because the people who are purchasing these multi-million-dollar condos don't necessarily want affordable housing on the lower 50. But I think there's opportunity there to use space that's otherwise just not used. But it always has an effect on ROI and kind of not in my backyard kind of mentality.
Yeah, I'm very appreciative that you raised that point, Drew, because very often we tend to forget the social elements. And so also, Alexa, that you were mentioning the situation in Hamburg, we didn't talk about the problem with Berlin as well, because we could have added that one to the mix.
Yes,
and of course, here in Vienna, we have a long tradition with regards to social housing. And in fact, without tooting our own horn here, we're seen as being a model when it comes to social housing. Whether that's always justified or not is something that we'll leave to others. I'd like to go ahead and bring in a comment that came through from Richard. We need to change the development cycle. Everyone wants grade A. We can build housing if we can get the public to shift from the poorly designed mass housing. The mass house builder controls the market. What are your thoughts on that one, Susanna?
I wouldn't say it in this way because especially in Vienna, that's not a mass house builder. Sometimes there are families and there are owner and planner, but it's getting better because we have Alexa said it that especially in cities we have to re-densify our cities. And what happens right now here is we are not thinking in buildings anymore, not only on buildings, we are thinking in districts. This is what happens right now, and this is very important because we have to share our energy, our mobility, our materials, our food, and especially when it comes to social housing, we have a lot of building groups. So they are forming together, putting the money together and building up their own houses, and they will get also space for it. So I think it's not only the big industry and the big, that maybe there are some companies, but the development is right now in another direction. It's in the direction, build up your district and where it is livable, especially in Corona times.
From the perspective of the U.S., there's always, the issue of, the balance between regulation and private enterprise, and developers want zero regulation, or not very much in the U.S. And I think the result of that is just maximizing square footage and your ROI on that square footage. And if that makes a building not as efficient and puts money in the developer's pocket, they'll move forward. So I think there's an opportunity for regulation to kind of hone in some of the intentions of developers. And I don't mean to sound cynical in terms of private industry, in terms of housing and development in the U.S., but it really comes down to ROI oftentimes, and not efficiency and health of the building.
Catalina,
So-
you're working directly with policy. I'd like to get your opinion. Sorry, Alexa, I cut you off. I'll make sure you get a chance.
Okay, Mike, I think that we need to find drivers and incentives for the industries to change the mindset. I think here in Colombia, we have some laws and regulations that put a top price for social housing, and some regulations related of the minimum for social housing. But our problem is more with informal housing here in Colombia. So we tried to improve through those regulations, the problem of the informal housing and the risks related to informal construction. So, but of course, we need to improve the incentives. I think that the main goal is to dematerialize the economy, all the sectors, construction and real estate infrastructure and so on, and start thinking about a service, not as products. For example, if you build in order to rent, you want to have your asset, a better asset for the future because it's yours. So I think that there could be interesting incentives for renting instead of selling in the housing sector. It's not so common in Latin America, but we have seen it that trend in European countries and other developed countries.
I promised Alexia I wouldn't forget you.
I think there are some interesting models, for example, in Sydney, and Hamburg is also doing that. With new construction sites and new building areas, these areas will not be sold anymore. They're just rented for 100 years. And I think this is a really nice model because the land is owned by the city. And so the prices are, for best side, they are high, but on the other side, all the land comes back to in the ownership of the city after 100 years. And this is the model Sydney is doing, and Hamburg also, and I knew also, other cities in Germany are thinking about it too. That's one point. But for example, then I will go back a little bit to the construction side. For example, in Munich, if you want to build up a new floor on your house, to top in it, you have to make the construction as a timber construction. So this is a regulation to get the city a little bit more sustainable from the material side. That's one point. And the other point is, and that's from the legal side, we have to go away from the view of just on energy efficiency. If we look on the sustainability of houses, and this is a big problem, for example, in Europe, but also in Germany. We have to switch from energy efficiency to resource efficiency because the nexus between resources used and climate change is much bigger than the nexus between energy use, because of the growing part of the renewable energy and the electricity mix. And I think we have to think about it. And this is a complete change in policy we have to make in the next 10, 15 years. And we have to focus on it.
Oh, that was very nicely said. Thank you for that, Alexa. We have some questions that have come through from the audience. I want to make sure that they're given an opportunity. There's another one from Richard. How are municipalities around the world changing their policies to tackle the climate emergency? What's the one most hopefully piece of legislation the panelists see in their country? So perhaps if we can go from bottom to top, Catalina, I give you the stage again. I'll give you a chance, Tatum. No worries.
There's nothing from me.
Okay, all right.
Okay, here in Colombia, we're working from many perspectives, but in the Ministry of Environment, we're working with a national strategy of circular economy that is like an umbrella as a general strategy that prioritizes different flows. One of them is construction, but we have packaging, we have industrial materials, we have biomass, water, energy, because it is interrelated. So we are working with those flows to try to reduce the impacts of materials mostly. But we have a goal for 2050 to reduce our greenhouse gases in a 51%. So we have legislation related to waste and residues. We have things related to fossil fuels, and we are working in different sectors to reduce or to improve the performance of the industries.
Okay, great. I will pass on you, Tatum. Don't worry, I won't put you on the spot. Anyone else like to go ahead and contribute?
Yes,
Go for it. Go for it, Susanna.
Okay. In the last 3 years, we worked on a green market report, and it's finished right now. We asked all our municipalities, which has more than 10,000 inhabitants, and right now we know that from 10 municipalities, 9 do have a strategy. This is it's kind of different, but most of them has climate adaptation and some of them has also climate mitigations, and they all do have a kind of strategies and think about their own incentives. And the biggest problem for them is most of the time water. Because Austria is been hidden by the climate change. So some of them has a lot of water because of storm waters, and the other one do have a great heat because and they have not enough water. And this drives the municipalities right now to think about new strategies.
Okay. Anybody else like to go ahead and contribute? I'm sure you can pass it. Please, group. Go for it.
You can download this green market report, sorry, on our website.
Perhaps if you would like to go ahead and include the link in the chat, that would be fantastic.
Okay.
I just wanted to say in the U.S., it's still very early stage, but the development of the carbon market and a carbon credit system to incentivize people to build, with materials that support the vision of net zero building. That's especially with the new administration. There's a lot of money moving in that direction, but the carbon credit system, I think, is very similar to how solar operates in the U.S. and I think we're all very hopeful that it will help make an impact.
I'd like to go ahead and add something to that, Drew, what you just said. Part of the infrastructure initiative that is currently being discussed within Congress is not necessarily always talking about building something, but also removing things. And they're looking at specifically removing roads that were actually used for not very kind purposes to keep certain parts of the populace away from each other. And so I think that we have an opportunity to actually go ahead and do something for the climate, and also make sure that we're able to come up with something constructive tied to the social elements. Alexa, I don't know if you had anything you'd like to go ahead and add to this conversation.
Yeah. Well, it's a big discussion also from the International Resource Panel that is located at the UNEP. We know that around about 60% of all raw materials that we still have on Earth are now, in any case, are in construction, in the construction site, in buildings. 60% of all resources of the world. And this is a huge amount. So urban mining is one of the biggest issues for the future. So we have to think about really good recycling. We have to think about how no deconstruction. I would say rebuilding and build up, take part of the old buildings, make new ones from it and so on. Because I think, especially for example with copper, the situation is it's getting, I think, 10, 15 years. We will really have problems to have enough copper, for example, also to build up the whole renewable energy infrastructure, and therefore we need that stuff, and it's just in forms of water lines and so on, and still in houses. So that's just an example for that.
Yes, and we should never forget that we're talking about materials that do have a value. Just because we're not utilizing that value doesn't mean that it doesn't have a value. Tarun, I would like to go ahead and get started with you with another question that came through, and I think this is something up your alley. There's a general opinion that policy intervention is the best way to promote green buildings, but what role can a resident end user play in the promotion of green buildings? Oops, you are on mute. See if I can unmute you. No, I can't.
Oh yeah, sorry. I've
no worries.
unmuted myself. Oh, this question is from my brother. So we've had this discussion at length. I'm gonna ask the others to have the others answer this question.
Okay. All right. Okay. Fine. I'll go ahead and leave that to anybody else from our esteemed panelists.
Okay, I have an idea about that. So
okay.
That's because that's my business. What I do is taking all the materials, and I can calculate from any building the construction materials, resource input, abiotic, global warming potential, and also the included gray energy, and I can give the suppliers and end users the amount of in the hand, and there's still the possibility to compare to other buildings. So it's possible, and there's no voodoo.
No, it's definitely no voodoo. Susanna, Drew, any thoughts from your side?
In terms of the end user, as long as they have agency, I think that's the biggest agent for change. I think oftentimes the technology to make better buildings and healthier buildings, is always there, but the market and the end user is always the biggest challenge. So, as someone who manufactures the material, I think controlling that narrative and conveying that to the end user is really, really important in a way that allows them to make that transition.
Okay, Susanna, perhaps if you'd like to go ahead and share something, and I got your link, and I'll go ahead and share that with everybody.
Yes, thank you, because I put it in the private link, but
that's fine. No worries.
I'm scared. Okay, it's not only the technique is standard; it's also the green building is also standard already. We do have our certificates. This is from our municipality here in Austria, from the ministry. It's climate active. This is the name. And we do also have other certificates, and also the energy certificate. And what we must not forget is we have two instruments. We will get two new instruments here in Europe. The one is the European Green Deal, and the other one is the renovation plan. And with these two instruments, we will get a bunch of money to renovate our houses. And we do have the new regulation. This means since last year. This means the net zero energy building. which means every building which will be new built and also will be renovated must have the standard and must reach the standard of the net zero energy buildings. And
Susanna, I do not agree with you. I do not agree with you. It's completely running in a wrong way.
Yes, can you explain it?
The problem is, for example, a new guy, he built up a fantastic building. Yeah, it's a zero energy house. And when you take a look on all the CO2 emissions that comes from construction materials and from the building construction phase, it's 40% of more than 50% of the whole CO2 balance is in that part. And the renovation part of the European Green Deal just focuses on the energy efficiency, and that does mean that we put our houses into plastic. We don't use much energy in the using phase, but we do not take a look on the first phase, that's extraction of the materials, production of construction materials, using phase, transportation, and all that stuff. And more than especially in Europe, we still have the nice situation that maybe we will get 2050 100% renewable electricity mixed, and then energy efficiency it doesn't create CO2 emissions. But all the plastics, all that critical materials we still have in the houses, yeah, that the effect is that some of these buildings have to stand more than 150 years, zero emissions producing, but without any renovation, anything else, no other material. And after 150 years, the CO2 balance is then in balance. And that is the problem with the energy directive we still have on, and also in the Green New Deal, that runs completely in a wrong direction, because nobody is looking on the nexus between materials and CO2 emissions.
I agree, and I think, you know, the way we build, it really has to be looked at holistically, and the life cycle assessment really has to be integrated into the whole process. And
Yes.
you know, especially in the U.S., you know, what we do is we wrap our homes in plastic to make them super efficient and whatever. Which, you know, what we're doing is looking at plant-based and breathable systems. You know, we're looking at that, but wrapping in something in plastic, if you look in 20 years, the efficiency is not what it was when it was first built. So it's also looking at the performance over the long term, not just like when it was built.
And at least we still have another problem, the LCAs.
You're
sorry, because
right.
Sorry, Susanna.
You're definitely right, because the net zero energy buildings renovation regulations is not specifying something about the life cycle costs and the materials. That's right, yes. But in our Austrian regulations and in the Klimaaktiv certification, you get more points if you're using renewable materials. For instance, timber constructions or hemp materials. So there are two pairs. I think there are different kind of on approach here, but that's right, and I hope it will change on the European Commission label.
Did you hear that, guys? You have an opportunity here in Austria because we're looking for your material. And it's good for Susanna to go ahead and highlight that. And there, yes. I cannot hold myself back. Alexa, Michael Brongart would have been proud of that, of what you just said. We are reaching. Sorry, I had to throw that in. I'm afraid that we are reaching the end of our allotted time, so I want to go ahead and make sure that everybody's given the opportunity to pass on some key thoughts that they would like the audience to actually remember them with. So perhaps if we could start with you, Catalina.
I would say that we are all key stakeholders. All the value chain needs to be improved, and the consumer needs to be more informed and educated. So I think we are making some efforts, but we need to make greater efforts in real estate sector and in buildings in general. But I think I am optimist about that we are going to find new ways to have better buildings and sustainable buildings and a better environment in general. And thank you for the invitation again for this panel.
Well, thank you very much for your kind words, and I have to be optimistic myself simply because we have the opportunity of having a conversation with no BS, and I'm very proud of that. Drew, you'd like to go ahead and give your last thoughts from your side?
You know, I think it's a really exciting time. It's a very urgent time, and you know, especially the space that Tarun and myself are working in, looking at agricultural materials. You know, there's a great opportunity to look at, you know, the synergy between agriculture and construction, and then also look at how we conduct agriculture to, you know, help maintain carbon in the soil as well. That's one of the best ways to sort of hold carbon. So just, I think it's a very exciting time, and the time is right for a lot of innovation and people to kind of jump on board.
Well, to quote a Swedish teenager, I believe she said that we have no time. So there isn't much of an opportunity. Susanna, how about from your side? Anything you'd like to go ahead and add? Famous last words.
Yes, I think we have so many solutions, ideas, innovations, and technologies. We have to use them, and really fast. It's better to use it in cooperation. I would love to hear you all again. Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, and I thank you very much. Especially what nobody knows is that Susanna had her second vaccination today, and so she was kind of cramming our session in. So I'm very, very appreciative, Susanna, that you were able to go ahead and find the time. Thank you for that. Alexa, how about you? Any famous last words from your side?
Well, talking about sustainable construction starts with climate protection. And climate protection is a key of the, or that is caused by the resource use. And actually, we are still running in a resource scarcity, land, water, but also all the ideologies. And we have to get innovations in the resource efficiency in the whole industry. And this is the key for our life, the future. And that's I'm still working on. Thank you for your invitation.